You watch, do not blink. Darkness waits where your courage dies. Fear is not an enemy, it is a leash, invisible yet unyielding. The world does not punish the coward, it manipulates them. Those who cannot command their own terror are slaves to every shadow, every whisper, every heartbeat that echoes too loud in an empty room. Fear is not something you feel, it is something that owns you, a silent partner in every step you take. And once it has its grip, it never lets go. He huddled beneath the weak halo of a street lamp, the light flickering as though uncertain whether to illuminate or betray him. His heart hammered in a rhythm of panic and denial, each thump synchronized with the footsteps behind him, footsteps that seemed to belong to no one, yet belonged to everything he feared. He forced a smile, a brittle attempt at bravery, a mask against the truth that his legs threatened to betray him. His hands trembled, and he hated them for it, hated the way fear could turn flesh into enemy. "You think you control this?" The darkness seemed to ask, pressing in from every side. I try," he whispered, voice brittle as ice cracking under weight. "You do not. It controls you," came the reply, as though the night itself had leaned close to speak, tasting his weakness. The street stretched endless, empty, but for the curl of fog that twisted like searching fingers, brushing his face, caressing his neck, teasing him with the invisible. Each breath he drew rose like smoke into the cold air, vanishing instantly, leaving only the hollow echo of his own mortality. Shadows pooled in corners, crawling up walls, bending reality in ways logic could not follow. Silence was not empty here. It was a predator, listening, learning, waiting. Even the wind seemed cautious, reluctant to disturb the poised violence of the night. He wanted to run, he wanted to fight, but the truth was already embedded in his bones. He was no master here. Fear had him, cradled him, and he obeyed without realizing it. Every heartbeat, every trembling thought whispered the same lesson: power is illusion. Courage is temporary, and the world, patient and indifferent, would always remind him of that. Fear whispers the truth before it strikes, and you obey. The knife is never in the dark, it's in your hand first. Humans crave loyalty, yet betrayal is the most honest currency. Trust is a fragile illusion, a candle flickering against the wind of human desire. Those who believe in loyalty are walking arsenals, their naivety sharpening the knives that will pierce them. To survive, you must accept that allegiance is a transaction, and every friend carries a balance sheet written in blood. Loyalty is a luxury the world rarely affords, and when it is given, it is most often the trap that devours you whole. He had laughed alongside the one he called a friend, shared confidences in smoke, filled rooms where secrets hung like cobwebs. The friend's smile had been warm, inviting, an emblem of trust, but behind it hid a venomous precision. Every whispered detail, every soft confession was catalogued, indexed, and weaponized. He felt the warmth of laughter, the comfort of familiarity, and believed it meant safety. But the knife was already in his hand. He had only failed to notice the wound it inflicted. "Why?" he asked, voice quivering, still tasting the sweetness of a trust now poisoned. "Because you trusted me," came the quiet reply, deliberate and cold, as if each word carved itself into his flesh. "And now you understand the price." The candlelight flickered across cracked walls, casting shadows that danced with malicious intent. The room smelled of iron and deceit, a copper tang that reminded him of every betrayal he had ignored until it became unavoidable. Silence lingered like a suffocating cloak, punctuated by the slow, methodical drip of a faucet, each drop a metronome of inevitable pain. He stared at the friend, searching for a sign of regret, but found only the same calm, calculated eyes that had guided the knife to its mark without hesitation. He realized with a cold surge of clarity that betrayal is not personal, it is inevitable, it exists beyond intent, beyond morality, it is a force as old as desire itself, indifferent to your pleas or explanations. Those who expect mercy from the world will only taste the precision of its cruelty, and in that moment he understood that fear, the leash he had learned to feel, was nothing compared to the calculated violence of someone who had learned to wield trust like a weapon. The knife waits for no one, and loyalty is always its prey. Every handshake, every word of comfort, can be folded into betrayal's geometry, and yet this lesson, as brutal as it is essential. Only the prepared survive the inevitability of human treachery. Betrayal is not personal, it is inevitable. Fixation is a disease, and it eats you alive. Desire blinds, but obsession enslaves. It twists the mind, reshapes morality, and transforms the ordinary into a cage of relentless visions. Those who fall into its grip see the world not as it is, but as a landscape of targets and impossibilities, each heartbeat echoing with the urgent need to possess, to understand, to dominate. Obsession turns allies into enemies, allies whose interference is perceived as treachery. It turns dreams into prisons, where the walls are lined with the consequences of single-minded desire. Control it, or it will control you, until the person you once were is buried beneath the ruins of a mind consumed. She sat at her desk, hunched over pages of sketches, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. The target of her fixation, a man, a secret, a desire, was drawn in every angle, every movement frozen in graphite, every imperfection exaggerated, every detail catalogued. Coffee-stained notes littered the floor, her pen dripping with frustration and devotion alike. Hours blurred into one another, a relentless sequence of lines and shadows, every stroke a prayer and a threat. She forgot sleep, forgot meals, even forgot herself, as the obsession wove its threads tighter around her mind. Her friends' calls went unanswered, her family's inquiries met with hollow assurances. Nothing mattered but the pursuit. Nothing existed outside the magnetic pull of the object she could not release. "You'll stop," a voice whispered from behind her, tentative and alarmed. "Stop. No, never," she said, eyes fixed, hand trembling over the page. Her voice was a mixture of mania and reverence, a confession she could not retract. "And when it destroys you, then it has served me," she replied, calm as a guillotine, aware that the sacrifice was hers alone. The room itself seemed to participate in her fixation. Shadows in the corners stretched unnaturally, curling like living things eager to consume her reflection. The storm outside battered the windows with a furious rhythm, each beat a drum of fate, announcing the inevitable collision between desire and destruction. Ink smears across the page mirrored the chaotic pulse of her thoughts, a visual echo of the madness growing inside her chest. Lightning revealed the jagged lines of her obsession, illuminating the edges of her isolation in stark, unforgiving flashes. She paused only to inhale, lungs filling with the scent of paper, coffee, and tension. Her reflection in the glassed window was unrecognizable. a woman hollowed out by fixation, eyes blackened with hunger, veins thrumming with relentless focus. The storm outside mirrored her inner turbulence, and for a moment she feared not the consequences, but that the obsession would leave her too fragmented to survive them. Yet she could not stop. Obsession does not reason. Obsession does not negotiate. It consumes and reshapes until surrender becomes indistinguishable from triumph. Hours, days, or perhaps weeks passed indistinctly. Each line she drew, each note she scribbled, each whispered incantation of intent, bound her tighter to the object of her desire. The world outside her small, store-racked room receded. Reality bent to the rhythm of her fixation. The storm's fury became her heartbeat, the shadows her only companions. And in that relentless, devouring moment, the ultimate truth revealed itself. Obsession whispers, but you are deaf until it screams. Her scream would come, soon, nod, convince, crush. Power hides behind charm, and charm is the most lethal of all weapons. The one who smiles last shapes reality, bending perception to will, twisting loyalty into obedience without ever drawing steel. Manipulation is not a whisper, it is a symphony of deception conducted with precision. To master, it is to wear a mask so convincing that even the wearer forgets the face beneath. Influence is never given, it is extracted from ignorance, from desire, from the very pride of those who believe they are free. The politician moved through the crowd like a predator in tailored suits, his smile a promise and a threat simultaneously. Hands were shaken, backs were patted, eyes held for just a heartbeat too long, small gestures, yet every one a thread in the web he wove. Half-truths spilled like honey from his lips, sweet enough to blind the listener, poisonous enough to shape their choices before they even knew they had been ensnared. Laughter echoed through the marble hall, applause punctuating the illusion of unity, yet behind the curtains, every decision, every movement had already been anticipated and accounted for. The web grew, invisible yet unbreakable. Allies and enemies alike danced to a rhythm they could not hear. "You think I follow?" one aide asked nervously, voice caught between fear and reverence. "You always do. You cannot resist." The politician replied, calm, eyes glinting like steel beneath warmth. His words were not a threat. They were a certainty, a law of motion that no one could defy. The ballroom sparkled with light, crystal chandeliers scattering prisms across polished floors. Yet shadows stretched long and deliberate, sliding along walls like sentinels. Eyes flickered from guest to guest, predatory, sizing prey, calculating loyalty and weakness in a single glance. Every smile, every nod, every handshake was catalogued, stored, and twisted into influence. Even the laughter, melodic and bright, was a tool, a distraction from the strings pulled behind the veil. In that room, control was tangible, an invisible force pressing against every chest, shaping thoughts before words formed. The untrained mind believed freedom existed here, in applause and chatter, yet freedom was an illusion, an element of theater for those too naive to see the stagecraft. And the politician, he was both actor and director, every gesture rehearsed, every pause deliberate, every charm weaponized. Every nod was a submission, every smile a trap. Allies could fall, enemies could rise, yet all moved along the lines dictated by the unseen hand of the master. The audience may never realize it, but the room itself had already decided who would leave intact and who would leave broken, long before anyone applauded the first speech. Every nod is a submission. Every smile a trap. Your tears are currency, your rage a tool. Emotional weakness is the most precise weapon in existence. It is subtle, almost invisible, yet when wielded correctly, it bends people, situations, even nations, without a single strike. Those who understand emotion can command armies, not with swords or guns, but with whispered provocations, a glance, a carefully timed silence. The one who masters fear, desire, grief, and anger can orchestrate chaos while remaining untouched, untouchable. Emotional exploitation is the craft of kings and killers alike. Its edge is sharper than steel because it strikes where flesh and pride intersect. A sibling sat curled on the floor, trembling in the shadows of their bedroom. Silent tears traced rivers down their cheeks, a storm of grief unseen and unheard by the world. They did not realize that the other watched, memorizing every quiver of lip, every shudder of breath. Each tear was catalogued, each sigh noted, stored as ammunition for a moment when control would be absolute. The room smelled of damp fabric and despair. The curtains pressed against the window like hands, trying to hold back the storm outside. The watcher remained still, an observer hidden in plain sight, heart calm while the others unraveling became a map of vulnerability. "Why do you care?" the crying sibling asked, voice breaking, accusing. "Because I know what it buys me," came the measured reply, smooth and cold. The words struck with precision, teaching the lesson that emotion is a currency, and those unaware of its value are always in debt. Rain hammered against the windows, each drop like a small drumbeat marking the passage of cruelty. The house groaned as if mourning its own existence, shadows twisting along walls and corners, feasting on regret. The flickering lamp cast half light across the room, illuminating fear, sorrow, and calculation simultaneously. Silence was a weapon here. It amplified every tremor, every whispered regret, every heartbeat that betrayed weakness. The sibling shivered, unaware that each sob, each intake of breath, was a ledger written in vulnerability that could be spent with devastating efficiency. Every moment of perceived intimacy, every confession, every fragile whisper was fodder for power. And the watcher knew, emotional weakness is an open wound, a blade that pierces deeper than any iron, leaving scars unseen but permanent. Pain is instructive, pain is precise, pain is currency, and if you allow another to hold it, they will carve their will into your very being. Pain is the sharpest blade. Don't let anyone hold it, or they will carve you. Who are you when the world forgets your name? Identity is a fragile costume. Strip it away, and chaos stares back at you from the mirror. We cling to labels, to faces we craft for others, believing they are us. But when those masks crumble, when reflection fails to match expectation, the mind fractures, revealing a hollow core that trembles under scrutiny. Those who survive such a collapse are either masters of reinvention or prisoners of the void. The world does not pause to ask if you are whole. It consumes anyone who cannot define themselves quickly, mercilessly, and without hesitation. He stared into the cracked mirror, eyes tracing lines that were both familiar and alien. The face looking back was a stranger, a mosaic of mistakes, desires, and borrowed masks. Each fragment whispered a question: which version is real? The reflection fractured further as he blinked, shadows stretching across his face, merging with the cracks in the glass. He tried to speak, to anchor himself with a name, but the sound that left his lips belonged to someone else entirely. Panic rose like smoke, curling through his chest, filling the hollow space where certainty had once resided. "You are not yourself." A voice whispered from the doorway, careful, almost gentle. I don't know," he admitted, words trembling. They were not an admission of weakness, but a surrender to clarity. The terrifying knowledge that identity is not guaranteed, not permanent. Hallways twisted around him, angles bending impossibly, corners deepening into darkness, as if the house itself were aware of the fragmentation occurring within him. Mirrors multiplied, reflecting not reality, but possibility, the person he was, the person he pretended to be, and the versions that lurked beneath both. Silence pressed against his ears, amplifying the heartbeat that seemed foreign, that seemed to belong to a stranger entirely. Fear and obsession had taught him external truths, how to read others, how to manipulate, how to endure pain. But identity's fracture struck internally, mercilessly, without warning. Control was an illusion. Even mastery over emotion, over others, could not shield him from the slow erosion of self. He realized the lesson too late. To know the world, you must first know yourself, and in his reflection, he saw nothing he could trust. Mirrors splinter light, hallways twist unnaturally, silence is deafening, and within this chaos, a truth emerges. The most dangerous enemies are not the ones outside, but the ones who reside within your own fractured mind. The truest danger is knowing yourself last. Power is not taken, it is extracted violently from the weak. Strength seduces, lures, and punishes. Power does not ask politely, it demands obedience, exacts tribute, and shapes the world to the rhythm of its possessors. Only the relentless survive its hunger, the ones who endure the pain, the betrayals, and the solitude. The rest perish quietly, their names lost to memory, their ambitions crushed beneath the weight of stronger wills. To chase power is to court danger at every turn, to understand that every victory comes at a cost, measured in blood, loyalty, and the slow erosion of humanity. The king walked among the corpses in the pale light of dawn, each frozen body a silent monument to his ascension. The air was sharp with frost and iron, and every breath drew a reminder of the price of ambition. Each life taken, every betrayal exploited, had brought him closer to the throne no one else could claim. He had calculated, anticipated, and manipulated, allowing no sentiment to disrupt the precision of his conquest. The weight of solitude pressed against his chest. There were no companions here, only echoes of choices made, and the chilling knowledge that each step toward power left him more isolated than before. Was it worth it? A voice asked from the shadows, hesitant, trembling at the sight of devastation laid bare. Worth, the king replied, scanning the horizon, eyes sharp, unflinching. It is survival. The streets below, broken and abandoned, were shrouded in mist that curled like fingers around the crumbling walls. The wind carried whispers of lives surrendered to ambition, echoes of promises broken, and the soft cries of those who underestimated the price of dominance. Silence stretched between ruins, punctuated only by the rustle of frost-laden branches and the distant clatter of debris shifting under gravity's pull. The city itself seemed to mourn, bending to the inevitability of conquest, each stone soaked in sacrifice and submission. Every act of power is a contract written in blood. Every throne is a chair with jagged edges, every crown a weight that crushes slowly. The king understood that the world does not reward mercy, it favors ruthlessness disguised as wisdom, precision masked as strategy. Allies can be devoured if necessary, enemies made servants, and even loyalty is negotiable when measured against survival. Strength does not forgive, it annihilates. He looked at the horizon, dawn breaking over twisted streets and silent bodies. Power was no illusion, it demanded payment from those who sought it. And yet, even as he stood victorious, he knew the truth that every ruler learns, often too late. The higher you climb, the thinner the air of companionship, the colder the throne beneath your hands. To hold power is to bleed alone. Truth is the blade no one dares read. All lessons, all manipulations, all betrayals converge here, at the edge of comprehension where few dare to linger. To master the world, you must first master yourself and accept the darkness lurking within your own soul. Fear, obsession, manipulation, emotional exploitation, identities fracture, power, each a weapon, each a chain, each a mirror reflecting a fragment of your ultimate self. Those who fail to confront the shadow inside themselves are prey to the illusions of control, wandering through life as marionettes unaware of the strings pulled by both enemies and their own desires. Knowledge without mastery is destruction, power without self-discipline is annihilation, and the final truth, the one no one whispers aloud, is that survival demands embracing what others suppress, ignoring the rules that bind the naive, and walking paths they cannot endure. The scholar sat in the dim study, a leather-bound journal resting on his lap. Each page was a confession, a strategy, a record of victories and failures alike. His hands, steady despite the tremor in his chest, lifted the book to the fireplace. Flames licked the paper, curling edges into blackened tongues of smoke that spiraled like ghosts of those who had failed before him. Each page vanished in fire, taking with it secrets too dangerous for eyes unprepared. Smoke rose, filling the room, coiling around bookshelves and ceilings like specters of judgment. Every crackle of fire whispered a warning. Knowledge is power, and power is never free. Do you understand? A voice asked, calm yet urgent, cutting through the haze of smoke. Yes, it is final. The scholar replied, his eyes reflecting the flames, a mix of reverence and determination, and deadly, yes, unavoidable. He affirmed, knowing that what he had learned, what he had written, would outlive him, shaping fates long after the ink had burned to ash. Every lesson applied, every strategy perfected, demanded a cost, and now the ledger was closed. There was no return, no revision, no second chance for the unprepared. Only those willing to confront the totality of themselves could survive. Ash floated on the wind, drifting out of the open window, carrying with it the weight of revelation. Shadows, once tangible, vanished into nothing, leaving the night listening, absorbing, as if aware it now held the last secrets of forbidden knowledge. Silence became deafening, screaming in the absence of sound, an echo of finality that pressed into the scholar's chest. Each ember that fell, each wisp of smoke, was a reminder that the past is gone, but the consequences of wisdom endure. Every move he had made, every trust betrayed, every calculated risk, now coalesced into a singular certainty. Survival is reserved for those willing to bear what others cannot. In the quiet aftermath, the scholar stepped back, surveying the empty fireplace, the lingering smoke, the absence of all he had so carefully documented. There was no pride, no triumph, only the clarity of inevitability. The world would continue indifferent and brutal, but he would navigate it armed with truths too heavy, too precise for the timid. Every whisper, every glance, every manipulation he had witnessed or enacted converged here, distilled into an unbreakable doctrine. And in that moment, he understood the final lesson, the one every master of shadows and ambition carries but rarely admits aloud. To survive, one must embrace the darkness within, acknowledge it, and allow it to sharpen, not destroy. And this is how the cold survive.